March 18, 1958, 9 p.m. Rouse Restaurant, East Harlem. That date and time still echo through New York's underworld. On that night, Carlo Gambino sent a dinner invitation to Bumpy Johnson. Every gangster in the city understood what that invitation really meant. It was not hospitality. It was not respect. It was a warning wrapped in silk. When a mob boss invited you to a private Italian restaurant like Rouse, there were only two possible outcomes. You either left with a deal, or you never left at all. Rouse was not famous to the public. There was no sign outside, no bright lights, just an unmarked door and a quiet reputation. Inside, there were only 10 tables. Every one of them had heard secrets. Every wall had listened to plans. Rouse was where executions were discussed before they happened. Sometimes it was where they happened. So when word spread that Bumpy Johnson had been invited there, people started placing bets, not on whether he would survive, on how long it would take before he was dead. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour at most. Bumpy Johnson was 53 years old at the time. He ruled Harlem, but everyone knew the truth. Harlem was surrounded. The Italian families controlled New York. They had soldiers, money, judges, police, and politicians. Bumpy was powerful, but he was still one man. And the man inviting him to dinner was Carlo Gambino. In 1958, Carlo Gambino was one of the most dangerous men in America. Quiet, patient, not loud like the old bosses. He didn't shout, he didn't brag. He waited, he planned, and when he moved, people disappeared. Only a few months earlier, Albert Anastasia had been murdered in a barbershop, shot while sitting in a chair. After that killing, Gambino quietly took control of the family. No speeches, no celebrations, just power. And now, Gambino wanted Harlem. The heroin trade was exploding. Money was pouring through New York like never before. Harlem was the gateway, and Bumpy Johnson was standing in the way. For weeks, Gambino tested him. Italian dealers crossed north of 110th Street. Money was offered to Bumpy's distributors. Messages were sent. Each time, Bumpy answered calmly. No violence, no public scenes, just clean responses. The Italian dealers didn't die. They simply vanished, sent to other cities, pushed out quietly, and every one of them came back with the same message: stay out of Harlem. That confused the Italian families. They didn't understand how Bumpy kept saying no. They had numbers, he had pride. They had armies, he had territory. So Gambino stopped asking. March 15, 1958. 3 days before the dinner, Gambino called his captains to a private social club in Brooklyn. The room was small, curtains closed, cigarette smoke thick in the air. Gambino spoke calmly. "We've been patient with Bumpy Johnson," he said, "but patience has limits." Everyone knew what that meant. Vincent Gigante leaned forward. "You want him gone?" "Yes," Gambino replied, "but not on the street. Too loud, too messy." Gambino lit a cigarette slowly. "I'm inviting him to dinner." The room went silent. At Rouse, Gambino explained everything would look natural. No guns, no blood. A drink, a moment, a heart attack. 53 years old, no questions. 8 made men would be present, all loyal, all ready. The plan was perfect. The invitation was delivered on March 16th, handwritten, polite, respectful. Bumpy Johnson read it carefully. Illinois Gordon stood nearby. "They're going to kill you." Illinois said. Bumpy smiled slightly. I know. You going anyway? Of course. Illinois stared at him. You got a death wish? No, Bumpy said calmly. I've got a plan. What Gambino didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had been preparing for this moment for 15 years. Back in 1943, Bumpy had hired an Italian language tutor, not a street teacher, a real professor. Grammar, dialects, expressions, regional accents, 3 times a week for years. Bumpy didn't just learn Italian, he mastered it. And he told no one. For 15 years, he sat in rooms with Italian mobsters while they spoke freely around him. They laughed, they planned, they shared secrets, all because they believed he couldn't understand a word. Bumpy listened and remembered everything. March 18, 1958, 8:45 p.m. Bumpy arrived at Rouse alone, navy blue suit, clean shoes, calm face. No bodyguards, no visible weapon. He knocked. The door opened. Mr. Johnson? Yes. They're waiting. Inside, 8 men watched him walk in. Carlo Gambino stood and extended his hand. Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming. Bumpy shook his hand. I appreciate the invitation. They sat. Menus arrived. Gambino didn't look at his. I'll order, he said. Then in Italian he spoke freely. He doesn't understand. Watch him. When I signal, add the medicine to his wine. The men nodded. One laughed softly. He looks calm for a dead man. Another touched the vial in his pocket. 5 minutes, that's all. Gambino turned back to English. So, Mr. Johnson, let's talk about Harlem. That was the moment everything changed. Bumpy Johnson looked up and spoke perfect Italian. The table froze. Before business, Bumpy said smoothly, let's order. I'll have the veal. You should have the fish, like your cousin's last meal. Silence. Carlo Gambino's face drained of color. Everyone at the table understood immediately. Salvatore Gambino, Carlo's cousin, murdered 6 months earlier. A secret hit, a family betrayal. No outsider was supposed to know that. Hands moved toward guns, but no one pulled one. How do you know about Salvatore? Gambino asked quietly. Bumpy smiled. I know many things. And in that moment, the execution plan collapsed. The room stayed frozen. 8 men, 8 guns, 1 table, and 1 mistake Carlo Gambino had never expected to make. Bumpy Johnson leaned back slightly in his chair, calm, controlled, as if he were the host and not the guest. The shock on the Italian faces told him everything he needed to know. They were no longer in control of the night. Carlo Gambino broke the silence. You speak Italian, he said slowly. Fluently, Bumpy replied. Better than some of your men. One of the soldiers half stood from his chair. His hand hovered near his jacket. This is a setup, the man said. He's wearing a wire. Bumpy calmly opened his jacket. No wire, no weapon. Just a man who knew too much. I didn't come here to die, Bumpy said. If I wanted that, I would have stayed home. Gambino raised his hand. The man sat back down. Gambino studied Bumpy closely now, not as an enemy, but as a problem that required thought. How long, Gambino asked, how long have you understood us? 15 years, Bumpy replied. Every meeting, every joke, every plan you thought was private. The weight of that answer hit the table like a gunshot. For 15 years they had spoken freely around him, planned murders, betrayals, power moves, and Bumpy Johnson had been listening the entire time. "Why now?" Gambino asked. "Why use it tonight?" Bumpy leaned forward. "Because tonight you tried to kill me." The waiter approached nervously with wine. "No," Gambino said sharply. "Take it away." The poison stayed in a pocket. Bumpy continued, calm but firm. "You stayed out of Harlem. We had peace. You crossed the line when you sent dealers north and invited me here." Gambino nodded slowly. "What do you want?" "Nothing new," Bumpy said. "The same deal we've always had. Harlem stays mine, you stay south, money keeps flowing." Gambino exhaled smoke. "And after tonight?" "After tonight," Bumpy said, "you never underestimate me again." Bumpy reached into his pocket. Every man at the table tensed. Slowly, Bumpy placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside were photographs, typed notes, dates, names, conversations written in Italian, details only insiders knew. Salvatore Gambino's murder. Who ordered it? Who carried it out? Where the body was hidden.
"If anything happens to me," Bumpy said quietly, "copies of this go to the FBI. Your family doesn't survive that." Gambino opened the envelope, then closed it just as slowly. "You planned this," Gambino said. "The language, the timing, everything." "Yes," Bumpy said. "I don't fight with bullets unless I have to. I fight with preparation." One of Gambino's captains leaned in. "Boss, we can't let him leave." Gambino shook his head. "If we kill him," Gambino said, "we destroy ourselves." Gambino looked at Bumpy again. This time there was no anger, only respect. "You walked into a room meant to be your grave and turned it into leverage." Bumpy stood. "I'm not hungry anymore." He buttoned his jacket. "Enjoy your dinner. I hear the veal is excellent." Bumpy Johnson walked out of Rouse at 9:23 p.m. alive, and Harlem stayed his. The door closed behind Bumpy Johnson. The sound echoed louder than any gunshot ever could. Inside Rouse Restaurant, 8 made men sat in silence. No one moved, no one spoke. The poison vial stayed untouched. Plates sat empty. Wine glasses were never raised. Carlo Gambino stared at the door Bumpy had just walked through. Finally, he spoke. "That man," Gambino said quietly, "is the most dangerous man I've ever met." One of the captains shook his head slowly. "Boss, how did we not know?" Gambino leaned back in his chair. "Because he didn't want us to know," he said. "That's the difference. We use power loudly. He uses it silently." Vincenzo slipped the poison vial back into his pocket. "So what now?" someone asked. Gambino's answer was immediate. "We do exactly what he said. We stay out of Harlem." No argument followed. Everyone at the table understood what had just happened. They hadn't lost a meeting. They had survived a disaster. That night spread fast through the underworld. Not the details, not the envelope, not the cousin. Just one sentence. Bumpy Johnson walked into Rouse and walked out. Within days, whispers traveled through New York. Bumpy Johnson speaks Italian. Bumpy Johnson understands everything. Bumpy Johnson keeps files. More importantly, Bumpy Johnson can't be trapped. For the next 10 years, the Gambino family never sent another dealer into Harlem. Not one. No tests, no negotiations, no threats. Harlem stayed untouched. Bumpy returned to his routine. He didn't brag. He didn't tell the story. He didn't correct the rumors. He let imagination do the work. That was always his strength. Years later, in the mid-1970s, a journalist sat across from Carlo Gambino. The boss was old now, sick, dying. The journalist asked carefully, "Did you ever try to kill Bumpy Johnson?" Gambino smiled faintly. "Once," he said, "at Rouse." The journalist leaned forward. "What stopped you?" Gambino closed his eyes for a moment. "7 words," he said softly, in Italian. He paused. "I didn't know he could speak." Gambino never explained further. He didn't have to, because by then, everyone understood the lesson. Bumpy Johnson didn't survive by being the strongest man in the room. He survived by being the most prepared. He didn't rush power. He studied it. He didn't expose his weapons. He hid them. For 15 years, he learned a language. For 15 years, he listened. For 15 years, he waited. And on one night, March 18, 1958, in a restaurant meant to be his grave, he used knowledge instead of violence. That's why Bumpy Johnson became untouchable. Not because men feared his gun, but because they feared what he knew. And that is a fear that never fades.